On Lisa's page 136, she talks about when we don't hide our sin, that we will feel vulnerable, we will feel exposed, and we'll want to go hide. And I couldn't
Yeah.
see who that was earlier that mentioned, that started with Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
that bailing and hiding whenever we know
Hmm.
that we've done something wrong. So if we kind of, if I want to kind of use that, go back to that analogy or that metaphor of a house. We were talking earlier about like building our house, on a foundation of truth.
Hmm. Right.
And if we build a house, we're going to want like some doors and windows because we're going to want to let like light and fresh air in,
Uh-huh.
because a closed up house with no light, all that darkness is not good. Nobody wants to live in darkness. And scripturally, we see all of this imagery about light and darkness. Jesus is telling us, I'm the light of the world. If we follow him, we don't walk in darkness anymore. We get to
Right.
walk in light. Ephesians 5:8, I wrote this one down. You were once full of darkness, but now you have the light from the Lord, so live as people of light. So when we build our house on this foundation of truth, we get a firm foundation. But likewise, when we invite light into our darkness, we get to live as people of light, which means that we are no longer in bondage to darkness. And I know like that language sounds kind of crazy, right? Like bondage and darkness. So I want to kind of like explain what I mean by that. So bondage or darkness, this can be dishonesty. This can be idolatry. This can be adultery. This can be addiction. Um, and before like maybe any of us are kind of tempted to be like, oh, I don't really struggle with idolatry or adultery or addiction, I want to point out what Lisa says on page 140, which is that we are all addicted to something.
Hmm.
We are all addicted to something. And I also want to remind us of this really hard truth, that all sin, even what we call little sin, is a form of idolatry and adultery. It all forsakes God
Right.
for something or someone else. And all sin grieves the heart of God because of that. And we know that this is true, or we wouldn't go to such great lengths to hide it.
Hmm.
And I think what we try to do is we try to like hide, hide the sin away
Right.
and put it in the corners of the house, like where the light can't get to it. And then like if we're real worried about it or we don't want company to see it, then we'll like shove it in the basement. And we think like, oh, it's hidden now. But the thing about sin is it can't be kept secret, right?
No.
It doesn't stay secret.
No.
It
Right.
just doesn't. One, because God knows. Okay, so duh,
Hmm.
right? So we're
Right.
already,
So if you're
we're
not
kind of,
convicted, if the spirit's not convicting you there, you know,
yeah, yeah.
just
So
between
he
you and
already
God.
knows. So it's,
Hmm.
yeah. So there's no secret, right? We can't keep a
Hmm.
secret from God. Two, the thing about darkness is darkness multiplies darkness.
Right.
So I kind of think of it like toxic mold. We can put it down in the basement and we can close the door and we can cut off the light, but like mold grows in darkness. It doesn't need light. It actually thrives in darkness.
Right.
So the next thing we know, it's like in our walls and in our air ducts, and it's making everyone in the house sick, right? That's what sin does. And the enemy, though, will kind of start to lure us into isolation. I can't remember where I heard it. I feel like it had to have been like a Baptist preacher because I can feel like I can hear the intonation. But he was saying like, first sin fascinates and then it assassinates, right? I don't know if y'all have ever heard
Good.
that.
No.
Okay, but
Good.
it's true. But I think sin fascinates and then it isolates, and that's how it assassinates, right? Because we hide our sin, we have to hide ourselves, we disconnect from God and sometimes from others. And that's when the enemy comes in. And with all that like sickness and sin that's breeding in the darkness, so is all the shame.
Right.
And that's the next question that I want to kind of pose to our group. How does shame send us into hiding?
Right.
I want to ask that because The next point that I kind of
Yeah.
want to talk about, I have it written down that hiding ignites shame and honesty invites healing.